Should I? Okay. I think we'll start, and our friends will join us. Gone for some short break. Good afternoon. My name is Nissim Reuben. I am the Assistant Director of the American Jewish Committee's Asia Pacific Institute. I'm originally from India, from Prime Minister Modi's home state of Gujarat. And we are very honored that our former Chief Minister and now Prime Minister is the first Indian Prime Minister to come to Israel. We wanted to have this panel because we talked about all the facets of the relationship, but the most important facet that drives this relationship is the warm ties between the people-to-people ties. And that's what we want to explore on this panel. As you know, in 2009, the YNET did a poll which proved that India is the most pro-Israel country in the world. About 60% of Indians voted very strongly in support of Israel, compared to 58% Americans, 56% Canadians and Russians. That admiration of Israel is reflected in the 30 million strong Indian diaspora across the world, including the powerful and influential 3.5 million Indian American community in the United States. At AJC, we have been very privileged to lead American Jewish outreach, not only to India, but also to the Indian American community. And we are very honored that two of our Indian American communities, most influential, well-connected, but also benevolent leaders, Dr. Barai and M.R. Rangaswami, took the lead when Jason came to me and said, Nissim, we need to do something in Israel during Prime Minister Modi's visit. And I went to them and said, can you help? And they said, sure. And that's how AJC and the Indiaspora and GIJRI got together to put together this program. I want to start by asking each of our panelists to briefly speak on why they think it's important for their diaspora communities to work with the Jewish community, or for Jason with the Indian community, and then we will take the conversation forward. So MR, why don't you start? And MR is our community's tech leader in the Silicon Valley, who's also now leads in social entrepreneurship across the country.
Thanks, Nissim, and thank you for all coming here, and great to be in Israel. This is my second visit. I was here about 10 years ago as part of a Silicon Valley delegation that brought tech leaders to Israel to kind of connect with the community here, and it's been a tremendous difference in 10 years. I think Israel has really grown even bigger and even more influential in the decade I've not been here. Just to give you a feel for Indiaspora and why we are here, we are a leadership group of Indian Americans and Indians who have come together to do more global good as a group. And like Nissim was saying, we are about 3 million, little over 3 million in the US, and we are 1% of the United States. So when I started this organization 5 years ago, and a little over that, I started studying why Indian Americans, even though we're 1% of the population, we had really zero influence in India and in the US at that time, right? And so we started looking at the Jewish American community, who was only 2% of the population there, right? And when we look at the Jewish American community, there's 6 million people in the US, but they have tremendous influence. And so I started talking to a lot of Jewish friends of mine who are very helpful in helping us kind of think through what Indiaspora should look like, what are the strategies and objectives that we should have. And so that was the start of the relationship we had with the Jewish Americans. And so just to give you some statistics, Indian Americans are 1%, Jewish Americans are 2%, but when you look at the political landscape 5 years ago, Indian Americans were 0% of Congress in the political establishment, and Jewish Americans were 10%. So they're punching way above their weight in the US, right? But we had other areas we were more influential. For example, in the healthcare space, as Dr. Barai knows, we were like 7% of the medical doctors in the US are Indians, but we're 1% of the population. So in some areas we're greater in terms of influence, in some areas we're not. So Indiaspora's role was to bring the leadership group of doctors, lawyers, tech CEOs, NGOs and all together. And by forming this network and also connecting with similar leaders in India, we think we can raise the influence of our group. And that's kind of how we started. Mm-hmm. And we're happy to report that in 5 years, one of our aspirations was to have Indian Americans be 1% of the political representatives. Mm-hmm. And this year, Indiaspora had a gala in January in DC. Mm-hmm. We're actually 1% of Congress. We have 5 Indian Americans in Congress in the US. Okay, so I think we're learning from our Jewish brethren as to how to kind of get more influence. And so when Prime Minister Modi was visiting Israel starting this evening, we were more than happy to kind of be part of the catalyst, if you will, to bring our delegation of 15 people, all of whom are here today, to kind of bring this people-to-people relationship between India, Israel, and the United States.
Thank you, MR. Dr. Chauthaiwale, I've been in this business 18 years, 17 years. Jason's my guru. He brought me from India in this business. And I have worked over the 18 years with different, political leaders. But the only sort of anchors for us were brilliant diplomats like late Ambassador Jussel, who was ambassador here. But we could not penetrate the political leadership in India and get them to appreciate the importance of Jewish and Indian diasporas working together in the United States. You have been the first political leader who reached out and said, how can we help promote this partnership between the Jewish and Indian diasporas in terms of, we don't need any help from the Indian government, but in terms of building contacts and building networks. And I think the successful model that we have in the United States, we'd like to export. So how would you see both our diasporas benefiting the countries of their residents, but also benefiting India and Israel?
I think the good part is, like a Jewish diaspora, the Indian people of Indian origin are also very comfortable with multiple identities. They are very good American or Britishers. At the same time, they are equally proud of their Indian heritage, culture, family values, etc. And that makes job little easier. But at the same time, diaspora globally, Indian diaspora I'm talking about, is not uniform because there are so many variations in it, not only about regional, etc., but they have gone into different circumstances. For example, the diaspora in the West Indian Islands or Mauritius or even parts of South Africa, they essentially went there as laborers by Britishers. And then they settled there. Many of them, they lost the ties with India because for 4 generations, 5 generations, they never came back to India. Now, therefore, the challenges are also different than the Jewish diaspora. So I am frankly speaking, this question comes to me quite often since I started working on this new role, that how we can build the Indian diaspora like a Jewish diaspora in US. And I say that we are much more far away from doing that. 3-4 months back I came here. My first visit to Israel was on the invitation of a Jewish agency which has conducted a workshop on the diasporas, and it was mostly about the Jewish diasporas, but they wanted me to share my experience with Indian diaspora. It was a very revealing experience for me that what all is being done by the Jewish agency in collaboration with the foreign ministry here to connect the Jewish diaspora worldwide to Israel. We have a very small experiments in that direction, and if we try to take the lessons from Jewish agency and do something, because essentially the challenge in front of Indian diaspora is how to connect second generation Indians with India. And we have yet to find a solution to that. So I guess first generation Indians are broadly connected. They visit India very often, they attend the weddings, etc. But still the second generation Indians who are born and brought up there, how to connect them culturally or from the heritage perspective with India is the bigger challenge. And that is what I guess we need to focus on.
So, Dr. Chauthaiwale, you know that the same challenge exists in the Jewish diaspora as well, as how to connect the second generation, the younger generation of Jews to Israel. And one of our most successful models is the Birthright program that brings thousands of Jewish youngsters from around the world to Israel, not to settle, but to connect them so that when they go back, they will have that emotional bond with Israel. The two ambassadors that we had here, late Ambassador Jocelyn and then Ambassador Arun Singh, who used to host many of these delegations here, Jewish delegations at their homes, and they recommended to the Indian Foreign Ministry that we should have a similar program, and we have a small program called No India Program, KIP, which I think can be expanded to to get more second generation Indian in diaspora leaders to come. Dr. Barai, you have been a rock in the Indian community for support of Israel. From last 40 years, Dr. Barai has been lobbying every US lawmaker in the he's been there 45 years, every Indian lawmaker about the importance of relations between India and Israel. This is at a time when India was not as open to Israel as it is now. So Dr. Barai, would you like to throw some light on why you thought that relations, India-Israel relations is important to the Indian diaspora?
Thank you, Nissim, for inviting me. In 1965, as a college student of Faculty of Science at MS University in Baroda, I remember I wrote an essay which was an unusual thing to write in Indian University, and the title was Let Israel Live in Peace. So that goes back to 1965. And this has been born out of my personal conviction, and many of my Arab and Muslim friends, when they argue with me, and some of them said, Barai, make sure Modi doesn't do that. Modi doesn't do that. And I said, guy, wait a minute. You have 57 Islamic countries to live. What the heck is wrong if Jewish people have one of their own country? So this was my own personal belief that there is a room in this world for everyone to live peacefully, have their own culture, have their own religion, have their own way of living. And I think the Jewish people are entitled to that. And I got even more convinced of it last week. Actually, I flew in from Budapest today early morning. And yesterday we visited the museum of Roth Mikvah. This was a person, most extraordinary, talented Jewish artist who produced tinted glasses. In fact, his glasses have been used in the Hungarian parliament too. And yet, simply because he was a Jew, he was taken away by the Nazis and exterminated. So why should someone, simply because of his religious belief? So that's where it started, my own personal idiosyncrasy, whatever you want to call it. And ever since I came to United States, I realized that there are a lot many more common things between the Hindus and the Jews. Both of them are old civilization. As I was reading when Prime Minister Netanyahu said to President Obama, Jews were building home in Jerusalem 3,000 years ago, 300 years ago, 30 years ago, 30 days ago, and will build now. we have two oldest civilizations, one that started in the Middle East, in Jerusalem area, and one that started on the banks of Ganga Yamuna in India. We both have been victims of invasions. In case of Jews, they were driven out. They went all over the world to survive. They came to India that way 2,000 years ago. And also during the Second World War, when the Polish ship was floated with 5,000 people and nowhere to go, and it was our Gujarati Maharaja of Jamnagar who sheltered those 5,000 Jews. They were given shelter in Gujarat, my home state where I came from, and Kolhapur. And in current times, we both have been the victims of terrorism smear campaigns. And as Chairman Bergman has to say, when I had the honor of having a lunch at his home, that between 20 million Jews and 1.35 billion Indians, I think we have a strong diaspora. Right? So I think it's in today's world where there are a lot of crazy people who want to do a lot of bad things, kill a lot of people, unless you have strong defense, and strong defense does not mean only military defense. Military is a certain part of it, but to see what happened in Second World War does not happen. You need strong military defense, you need strong economy, you need strong education, and you need strong technology. And I think living in bad neighborhoods, Israelis, and India living in bad neighborhood with Pakistan and China, I think sharing each other's knowledge, each other's expertise, and going back to our own cultural, old heritage bonds, we will be able to put our case better in the world for our defense, and hopefully will convince those people who are crazy that there is a place in this world to live. But it's our strong partnership between the Indian diaspora and Jewish diaspora that will be better not only for our people, but humanity in general. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Barai. And Jason, you have led American Jewish outreach to India and the Indian diaspora for the last 25 years that you have been there, and you have been my guru. You brought me to where I am today. Why is it so important for American Jews to reach out to India and to us, to the Indian diaspora?
Thank you, Nissim. Look, I think previous speakers have said it in just slightly different language than I would use, but really almost exactly the same terms. Dr. Barai was talking about the difficult neighborhood that both Israel and India inhabit. But from my perspective, as an advocate for the Jewish people in the United States, we are, as Mr. Rangaswami said, 2% of the population, barely 2% of the population. The only reason that we have achieved the success politically that Jews have achieved is because we've made friends, because we've built coalitions, we've maintained coalitions, and we've identified our concerns with the causes that are in the national interest of our country. And frankly, in looking around the political and civil landscape in the United States, what community can better identify with those same concerns and values and objectives than the Indian American community, a community that also has, comes from an ancient civilization. We've all said the same cliches over so many years. Ancient civilizations, family-centered, focus on education, but also a very visceral sense of having to fight extremism, having to protect yourself against those who would oppress you, who would express prejudice, discrimination toward you. It's just such a natural alliance between American Jews and Indian Americans. And you have seen this relationship take off over the last 20 or 25 years. Nissim, you've very much been a part of that. I've been privileged to be a part of it as well. Stan has been a big part of it as well. The leadership of the American Jewish community has found true partnership in the leadership of the Indian American community. And then I would like to add, though, to that, what is missing, or what we're only starting to see the beginning of, is the professionalization of Indian American advocacy. because only through that means, when you have the same kind of civil service among the Indian community that you have among the Jewish community in the United States, people like yourself and myself and David Harris, for whom we work, and others, who are devoted 24/7 to safeguarding the interests of the community and reaching out and making friends and contacts and alliances through other communities, can we really see the full flowering, I think, of true Indian American empowerment. But you've seen, as Mr. Rangaswami said, you've seen enormous changes just in the last few years, where you now have 5 members of Congress representing the community, representing the interests of the United States, but coming from that community, I should say. So we identified early on that this was a community that we wanted to work with, and we've achieved considerable success, and I think we're just beginning.
Thank you, Jason. Out of the 5 members of Congress that Jason mentioned, AJC's Project Interchange Institute brought 3 of them to Israel over the last 10 years, when they were not elected officials, because we cannot bring elected officials through NGO funding. And they have been consistent friends of Israel. All of them are from the Democratic Party, and they have been very supportive of Israel and of Israel's concerns of a 2-state solution. So the investment that AJC has made over the last quarter century has really paid back. I think one opportunity in the future, and this is something I'll share 2 personal anecdotes. When Dr. Barai took me to see the Prime Minister, a group of small Gujarati Americans whom the Prime Minister knew from back home last year, and the Prime Minister asked each of us, what do you do and what's your vision for the future? So when he met me, and he knows that I'm Jewish and I'm Indian and I'm Gujarati from his home state, and Gujaratis are known as very good business people. So the first thing he asked me was, where are your Jewish and Gujarati roots? You still working? Where's your startup? So you see how much the Prime Minister is in admiration of the startup nation. And the second thing he said is that this successful model that you have, and this was Mr. Modi, said, that you have built, the Indian and the Jewish diasporas in the United States, must be replicated in other countries where we have influential diasporas, which are the Anglo-Saxon countries, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia. And again, I'll give you statistics. 3 million Indian Americans, 6 million Jews. Canada, 500,000 Jews. 1.2 million Indian Canadian Indians who are very friendly to Israel and a very important political base. We have about 5 members of parliament and about 2 ministers. In the United Kingdom, we are 380,000 Jews, 1.3 million Hindus. Very influential in UK politics. And in Australia, again, we are 500,000 Australians and about 200,000 Jews. So the opportunity for building our successful model of Jewish-Indian partnership in the United States is phenomenal in these Anglo-Saxon countries. So that is the other take from it. But we would have domestic, as we do in the U.S. In the U.S., our domestic, end is to advance our community's domestic issues, immigration, fighting hate crimes. Indian American community has been victim of hate crimes, and AJC and ADL reached out to us and said, these are the legal tools, this is how you can help. Those are the domestic issues that we work on. International issues are supporting robust India-Israel relations, advocating for them to our lawmakers. I'll give you an example. In 1999, President Clinton forbade Israel from selling 1 Falcon to China, and the cost was $338 million penalty. Led by AJC and in partnership with then U.S. India Political Action Committee, U.S. Impact, we successfully lobbied Congress to sell not 3 Falcon AVACs to India. And there has been a repeat order of another 3, and that was the first huge order that Israel got from India. So our partnership benefits the bilateral India-Israel relationship as well here on the ground. But I will, before we close, I will, and since MR and Dr. Barai were going to give some closing remarks, I will ask each of them to share their vision for the future, and then I will close the session. So, MR.
Great. So the one reason we are here as Indiaspora and as a delegation is to really explore the technology, innovation, entrepreneurship areas. So obviously I come from Silicon Valley, and there's a huge Indian American community there. I think 1 out of every 3 startups in Silicon Valley has a co-founder that's of Indian origin. Israel has a very robust, startup nation as well, and India's also got a pretty good percentage of entrepreneurships. One statistic that stood out this morning in meeting with Startup Nation Central was Israel has 1 startup for every 1,500 citizens. That's a telling statistic. So, we want to explore how that can take its roots in India and in other countries as well. And so what we're exploring here is there could be an interesting relationship between Silicon Valley, Bangalore, and Tel Aviv. And it's cross-border, it's not political, it's all around technology sharing, investing in each other's companies, opening up these 3 markets to companies from the other regions. And so a good part of our 5 days in Israel is going to be meeting with venture capitalists, incubators, accelerators, startups, to really understand how we can kind of move this forward. And we have some good ideas of, moving this forward both in India and in Silicon Valley in the future by having meetings and having conferences around that topic. So anything that you guys can be helpful to us over the next few days in introductions, in getting us connected with the right people here. We've had a great time so far. We've had the red carpet treatment from all the VCs and all the investors in Israel, and we've already started meeting with many of them. But we hope that'll be a telling outcome of this set of meetings that we have here. So very happy to be here. Our delegation is having a great time. In fact, tonight, I think, just an aside, there's a very prominent master chef here who does Indian Israeli fusion food. So we're going to be enjoying that tonight for sure. So thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Once again, I want to thank INSS for hosting this think tank seminar. And I want to thank American Jewish Committee, MR, and Indian Diaspora for being the co-host. It's our belief that we should take this relationship beyond United States and in the countries where there are significant number of Indian diaspora and Jewish diaspora, and have this interaction. I think it will be better for the world peace. Of course, it will be better for both the communities. And with crazy people proliferating in this world, once they see the message that there is a civilized way, both by good education, using the social media, and also influencing the world leaders, we can have a better defense. I think it will be good for everybody. Thank you.
Dr. Chauthaiwale?
I'll just give you 2 or 3 anecdotes. How many of you know that there are more than 60,000 Jews of Indian origin settled in this country? Okay, not so many in your foreign office may not be aware of this number, but tomorrow's event will be a very eye-opener for everyone. But aside this, how the connectivity is there and how Indians are connecting themselves with Jews and vice versa. Here, I had several experiences. In one of the meetings of the Indian Jews settled here for the coordination of tomorrow's community event, I started speaking in English, and after a couple of sentences, someone said that, why are you talking English? We all understand Hindi. So after settling here after 30-40 years, they have still kept the roots connected to them. You are all aware of the story of Moshe the small kid who was saved by his nanny during the terror attack, and now he is settled in India. So I was just reading a byline on the Indian TV that our Prime Minister is going to meet him tomorrow, and apparently he is going to speak with the Prime Minister in Hindi, that kid, which is, it gives a very strong message back home for us. And on the other side, on a little lighter note, in my first visit, I also visited the Bursa here, the diamond trading your center. And you know there is a very influential, very small but influential diamond trading community from Gujarat from settled here. So they introduced me to the president of Bursa, and we were talking. He wanted Prime Minister to visit it. That's all is okay. But then his parting shot was, Mr. Vijay, you must check the ancestry of Mr. Modi. I am sure he is Jew.
Well, I'm going to share with you a little lighter note. I'm from Gujarat. Mr. Narendra Modi is from Gujarat state. So many of our Indian friends in a short form call us Gujus. So Gujus, it's a short form. So I was talking with one of my friends, Jack Whiteman, who is an Israeli Jew, but he is a CPA. He says, Barai, now you know that I'm a Jew. And I said, Jack, you know, I'm a good Jew.
And Jason, some closing remarks?
Not really. I've really pretty much said it, but I must say that I've been waiting for today for 25 years, and it's very exciting to finally arrive at this moment in the company of such good friends and partners. Thank you, Nissim.
Thanks so much. And I think Ambassador Odedran will close. Just, Amar, what you said, AJC has our Project Institute brings Indian Americans and Indians policy and media leaders to Israel. I think through Indiaspora, we can work on bringing an annual mission of Indian American Silicon Valley venture capitalists and tech moguls. 1/3 of Silicon Valley is owned and started and incubated by Indian Americans. So if we bring them to Israel and on this annual mission, and have this flow of Indian investors from India, from the United States to Israel, I think that is business will be the best connector for us.
Absolutely, I think it's the business connection, but also the interesting angle is involving India in it. And so later this year, I think we'll have a couple of different opportunities where all three communities can get together.
Wonderful.
And I think that'll be even better.
Yeah. So, Ambassador Odedran will close the session.
As the host, at least as far as the premises are concerned, I want to thank my two partners in organizing it, Dr. Barai and Nissim Reuben, and I think for me it was interesting, at least in one aspect, and that is the third party, the communities in the United States, which is a common denominator in many respects which do not exist in other relations that Israel has with other countries. Although there are Italians and Greeks in the United States, but it's not the same relevance to India and to Israel. And so this is some sort of aspect of the relations which can be an area for cooperation, as I think was emphasized in the statement of you, gentlemen, when you spoke about the relationship in, for example, in Silicon Valley, or what Silicon Valley symbolizes, generally speaking. And so I do thank the speakers. I do thank the audience for staying with us. And we all wish the Prime Minister of India a successful visit in Israel. Maybe it is something like a restart up relations. Yeah. So have an enjoyable week in Israel, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of fruits coming out from this partnership and this week. Thank you very much. There is lunch outside.